It's the 29th of April 1945. Adolf Hitler is sitting in his bunker and he's seeing the world collapse around him. Perhaps now he realizes the game's up and he's not getting out alive. And in view of this, he decided to write a will. Probably a good idea in the circumstances. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, he signed it in the presence of Martin Bormann, Joseph Goebbels, and Nicholas von Below, his Air Force adjutant. However, this was not his first will. His first will was written several years earlier, and it was signed on the 2nd of May 1938. This was done the day before he left on a trip to Italy. And why did he do it? Maybe he thought he'd eat a dodgy pizza when he was there. Alternatively, it's probably because he was a hypochondriac. And although he had reason to fear illness, of course, because his mother had died aged 47 of cancer, and now Hitler was 49. He feared cancer and various other diseases. And he thought he had a great mission to accomplish in life, and he had to do it quickly before some disease conquered his body. That was his mentality, I think, to a certain extent. So he wrote a will out on just before he went off to Italy. Now, he put his will into 2 envelopes. Now, the outer envelope was addressed to Hans Lammers. Hans Lammers was effectively one of the people ruling Germany during the Second World War. Hitler was in Rastenburg in East Prussia for most of the time, and Lammers was he was a civil servant, a leading bureaucrat of the Third Reich. Lammers was given instructions to open the envelope in the presence of Franz Xaver Schwarz, who was also named as the first executor. Now, Schwarz was the treasurer of the Nazi Party, he'd been so for many years, and he was to do this until the very end of the war. Now, 2 people had to be informed immediately on Hitler's death, according to the Testament. And the first person was Julius Schaub. Now, Schaub is the person who was probably with Hitler for the longest. He joined the Nazi Party at the very beginning, or almost at the very beginning, anyway, in 1920. And he was with Hitler for 25 years. He left the bunker just before Hitler's death. And so he was a person who took care of Hitler. He was his aide. He sorted out his travel arrangements and things of this nature. You can see him here in this photograph at the time of the signing of the Munich Accords, where Britain and France decided to give parts of Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany. The second person who had to be told immediately was Martin Bormann. Now, this is quite odd. Bear in mind, this is May 1938. Martin Bormann was aide-de-camp of Rudolf Hess. And one might have thought that Rudolf Hess should have been the person informed. Now, Martin Bormann got close to Hitler only after Hess's flight to the United Kingdom in May 1941. So that shows that already Hitler had marked out Bormann for great things in his future. So, what did this will say? Well, Hitler left everything he had to the Nazi Party. Now, by this time, Hitler was quite wealthy, largely because his books were selling so well. The reason why his book was selling so well was because he was the dictator, and people had to have a copy of his book. It was given to people before they got married, and this allowed him to buy the Berghof, for example. He thought that the Nazi Party would manage his money in such a way, in a bit like a fund, and this comes out quite obvious, because what he wanted was that the Nazi Party to give the money to certain people. And this is probably why you're listening to this video now, to know if you are one of the beneficiaries of this will. So a number of people were to get some cash, and they are in order that Hitler put them down. First person is Eva Braun, and she was to get 1,000 marks a month, and that was really quite a lot of money. That would have allowed her to live in a very good state of existence. That's number one. Number two was his sister Angela. And Angela wasn't actually his sister, it was his half-sister, but never mind, that's what he wrote in the will. And she was also get 1,000 marks. Another 1,000 marks a month, by the way, a month. This is not a one-off, it's a month. 12,000 a year was to go to his sister Paula. She was then living in Vienna. And next one is his half-brother Alois. And he was to get a payment of 60,000 marks. That's the biggest single payment in here. It's a one-off payment. Now, Alois was then running a cafe conditore in Berlin, and he was doing very well out of it. And anyway, I've done a separate video on him. Next person was to be the lady who looked after his house, Frau Winter, and she was to get 150 marks a month. Next is Julius Schaub, who had been with him all that time. So he was to get a one-off payment of 10,000 marks and a monthly payment of 500 marks. All these payments, of course, are for life. So Hitler must have thought that the Nazi Party would manage his finances really very well. Next, we see he left some money for the people who were also looking after him. So Krause, who was a valet, was to get 100 marks a month, and Linger and Junge were to get a one-off payment of 3,000 marks. Now, Junge, he was the person who was later to marry Traudl Junge, who was the secretary, and he was killed in Normandy in 1944. Now, he also wrote down that 30,000 marks was to be distributed amongst his family in Spital in Lower Austria, and it was his sister Paula who was to decide how that money was to be distributed. Now, what's interesting, I think, from this will is that we can see that Hitler was clearly much closer to his family than is normally considered. Particularly, he was thinking of the family he'd sort of abandoned or wanted to have nothing to do with in Austria. But at the close of his life, he was thinking of them. Okay, right, so that was a quick video on something which I thought very, very curious when I came across this will. Thanks very much for listening. If you're interested in more stories about the Third Reich and the Nazi leadership, then please do subscribe. I also occasionally do other things related to history as well. And all the best from me.